back. I completely agree. When you first posted these notes, you put 1+1 on the Raptors. Completely agree. I think that makes the most sense for him. Gives him a year to kind of play out his options. I don't see it, and this is to me the key thing, Jason, with Kawhi. The reason why, if I'm him, I stay with the Raptors on a 1+1 is I genuinely do not think that if he goes to the Clippers that they will be the favorites to win the title. And at that point, if you're not going to be the title favorite with another team, why even bother leaving this offseason? Why not wait a year, let your options play out, and find a better situation? So I think he signs the 1+1.
Yeah, I completely agree, but I do want to give a shout out to the two extremely well thought out billboards in Southern California made by rich members of Clipper Nation. One said King of the North with the North crossed out, and SoCal, Pennsylvania. I think that's a bit of a slight to LeBron, but very well done. Very well done advertising by Clipper Nation, but I don't think it's going to work. The Clippers are a weird team to me because they have some nice young pieces and a couple of veterans, but they're going to really need some star power, not just Kawhi if they're going to contend in the West. So I think Kawhi realizes that. Is a second star really going to go play with the Clippers when you have LeBron and Anthony Davis in the same building just across the locker room? So I think that Leonard does stay in Toronto. They have one more year to run it back before Larry, Ibaka, Gasol become free agents. And I think he's going to try and repeat in the North.
And with that, let's get on to the Warriors' second free agent outside of Durant, which is, of course, Klay Thompson. There is some buzz, Jason, and some of this is probably just maneuvering by his agent, but some buzz came out today that if the Warriors do not offer Mr. Thompson the full max, that is a 5-year max contract, that he will be taking meetings with other teams, Jason. Top of his list, the Los Angeles Clippers.
Well, there
Now,
you go.
after building up all that excitement, I do not see him leaving the Warriors. I don't think there's any reason for him to leave. He loves the Bay. He's injured. I don't see any reason why he'd want to go to the Clippers. If you're the Clippers, are you going to get a guy who might miss the first half of the season? The whole season? Who knows? Can't see it. Think he's sticking with the Warriors. It's a match made in heaven.
No, it is. I will say this about Clay. He loves Golden State. I know it's Steph's team, but he's been there for years. He's been there 8 years now. I think he's going to want to have that reputation as a Warrior lifer. You're going to see in, 15 years, number 30 and number 11 hanging in the rafters of the new arena. I don't think Clay leaves at all. It's too good of a situation. And I think with the uncertainty surrounding Kevin Durant, it's hard to not want to sign Clay. The only conundrum is that Clay didn't make the All-NBA team this year, so he's not super max eligible. So he can't get, $200+ million deal, but he'll get pretty damn close to it from Golden State for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the next guy on our list here, Jason, would be Kemba Walker, who is probably one of the other guys who's one of the more interesting free agents this year because it's really hard to peg where he's going to end up, Jason. I think if he leaves the Hornets, there's going to be a long list of teams that are interested in his services. There's a lot of teams on the West Coast, shall we say, that are going to be interested. That said, I think he's going to end up back with the Hornets. I think they're going to give him a big deal. I don't know why they're going to do it. I don't agree with it. If I was them, I would not be re-signing him. I would rather just rebuild at this point. But I think they're going to give him the contract that he wants, and I think he's going to stay in Charlotte, Jason.
That's interesting because I saw a couple tweets leading up to the show saying the Hornets want Kemba, but they're not willing to be a tax team. And if they're going to get Kemba help because the Hornets are stuck in no man's land in the East along with the Pistons, the Magic, a lot of these teams are just going nowhere, the Wizards, potentially the Pacers. So I think he heads west, takes a little less money, and joins forces with LeBron James and Anthony Davis in Los Angeles because Kyrie Irving is probably their first choice, but being he seems to be bound for the Nets or at least one of the New York teams, I think that they zero in on Kemba. Kemba gets his chance at real postseason success, is that point guard that can really help distribute the ball to all the forwards the Lakers have, Kuzma, James, Davis, whoever else they assemble. There's talk of J.R. Smith winding up in Los Angeles if it's traded and bought out. So I think Kemba does go and gives the Lakers a big three to contend in what's going to be a pretty much wide open NBA next year. So I think he goes to the Lakers.
So we have one more guy who I think is a pretty good a pretty good guess for sticking where he is, and then after that it starts getting pretty interesting, Jason. So the last guy we have who's more of a maybe a little bit more predictable is Kristaps Porzingis. The Mavs traded for him. It would be an unmitigated disaster if he doesn't stay with the Mavs. I don't think there's much intrigue here. I think he's a Mav. I think he sticks with the team, and I don't see any way he's leaving.
I'm predicting Mavericks too, but if a team like Brooklyn strikes out on Durant and Irving and they end up going plan B and they don't get it to Tobias Harris, I think that Sean Marks could extend an offer sheet to Porzingis. The Nets were on his list of teams he wanted to be traded to when he did leave the Knicks just so he can kind of stay in New York. So that's something to keep a small eye on, but I do ultimately think he'll stay in Dallas.
If he gets an offer sheet, the Mavs are matching. I mean, that's where I think the intrigue disappears. Is him being restricted means they're going to match anything they get. So this is the guy that it starts getting interesting though, Jason. And I put this up yesterday, and since yesterday, I am already wavering on this one. And this is where I start getting much less confident. So this is of course where the Jimmy Butler section begins. And Jimmy Butler is the first guy on this list where outside of Durant, I really have no idea where he's going to end up. So my prediction is that he stays with the Sixers, but honestly, Jason, it would not surprise me one bit if he decides to go to a team like the Clippers, or he goes to a team like the Rockets in a trade. I mean, there's rumors about that. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up on a different team. I think if I was to put my confidence index, he is very near the bottom. I could see him on a lot of different teams. If Durant says he's going to go to the Clippers, for instance, I could see Butler immediately making the decision to move to LA and make that work. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So I think there's a few ways this could go. I'm going to say the Sixers here, but I really wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Houston. I think the Clippers are a real dark horse here. I think they're a really interesting team for him. If they get another free agent, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they pair Butler with one of those guys. And I could see Butler being interested in that sort of deal and getting himself out to a big market.
I'm saying Sixers for Jimmy Buckets too, and the reason is 3/5 of Philly's starting lineup from this past playoff run are all unrestricted free agents. You have Butler, Tobias Harris, who we'll get to next, and JJ Redick. So Sixers management traded a lot of guys and a lot of picks to contend for a championship this year. There's no way they let all three players walk. I think Redick's likely to move on. I think Harris is likely to move on. I don't think they lose Jimmy Butler. I think he's going to be the focal point of that team for years to come. The problem is if him and Ben Simmons don't learn how to shoot, they're going to be in trouble. But I ultimately do think Butler stays in Philly.
So the next guy on our list, Jason, is Tobias Harris, who you just alluded to. And I am taking this completely from my gut. No inside information here. I would say if you're reading the tea leaves, he's probably staying with the Sixers. Elton Brand has said all the right things. And given how much they traded for him, it seems like they want him back. But I really feel, Jason, that Tobias Harris is going to be a net next year. I think that they may lose out on Durant, and if they do, I think Harris is an absolutely beautiful fit. We'll talk a little bit down the road, but the thing that I love about Harris on this team is he is a perfect four for them. He can rebound at his position. He is an average to, when he's locked in, above average defender. He's a phenomenal shooter at the four. One of the better shooting fours in the whole league, actually, especially from beyond the arc. And that makes him a perfect player for this ecosystem. And the thought of either Russell or Irving, and we'll talk about that, along with a Levert and a guy like either Dinwiddie or your guy Joe coming in there hitting buckets around him. I mean, that's a nice shooting lineup. Gives space to the rest of the team. Would love to see that move. I think if you don't get Durant, I'm not sure that there's a better fit out of the free agents for the Nets. And so I think he's going to be a net. I think there's a chance. Again, this is just my gut. I don't have any inside info, but that's the feeling I have, is that's the way it might end up.
Look, as a diehard Nets fan, I am all in on this plan B of re-signing Russell and then bringing in Tobias Harris because he's the stretch four that the Nets are missing. He would absolutely flourish in Kenny's system. But since I have both Kyrie and KD going to Brooklyn, there's no room for Tobias Harris. And I think if the Nets do strike out, they could strike a deal with him. But we haven't had the Knicks on this list yet. So I do think the Knicks are going to get somebody. And I think Tobias Harris is that guy. You put him in the front court with Barrett and just let him develop. He still gets his New York homecoming, and he's the max free agent that the Knicks signed. Now, I know there are reports that if the Knicks don't get Irving, Leonard, or Durant, they will punt their cap space into next season, tank again, and then see what happens in 2020. But I ultimately think they will strike a deal with Harris.
I think you're on the money there. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening with Harris. I think he's kind of going to be an interesting case study um, for for the free agent market and what he gets paid if he gets a max deal. I think that's going to be a big one. I think the Nets might give it to him because I think he's a great system fit for them. But speaking of the Nets, we have D'Angelo Russell, and this is going to be some foreshadowing for something we're going to talk about in a little bit. But all signs are pointing to D'Angelo Russell leaving Brooklyn. I think with the news that has come out in the last couple days, it seems like you might be onto something here with who you're picking. But I'm sticking with the Suns. There's some poetic justice to the Suns just taking this pick or this player who just doesn't fit at all with what they need and just jamming that square peg as hard as they can into a round hole and ending up in the exact same situation they were in a few years ago where they had multiple point guards who couldn't play together. It just feels too poetic, Jason, and as a result, I have to stick with the Suns.
Well, look, he's really good friends with Devin Booker. I think that he wants a warm weather climate. He has a meeting set up with the Lakers reportedly. We'll get into Russell in a bit, but I'm going to use my head, not my heart, because my heart does want Russell to stay. I'm very confused right now as a Nets fan, which is why I said at the top of the show that Ben's my therapist. But I'm going Minnesota. I think Indiana would have been a solid pick here, but all signs point to them going after Ricky Rubio to be their point guard. So I think he goes, he plays with his friend Carl Anthony Towns, and the Timberwolves join that group of up-and-coming teams in the West with a Russell Towns tandem. We'll see if they can get anything out of Wiggins. You still have Jeff Teague there, but pains me to say this, I think that he is Minnesota bound.
Let's get to our next one because this is one of my favorites, and you have an interesting pick this is probably the one that when I was looking over our show notes was the one that maybe surprised me the most. Um, we have Al Horford, who coming into the season it was just a done deal. He was going to be a Celtic. I mean, there was no question he was going to stay with the Celtics. They were going to have him back unless a major free agent said, "I'm coming to Boston." Now all signs point to the fact that he's leaving, and I feel I really feel like he's going to Dallas, Jason. I mean, I think the Mavericks want him, and I think he's a great fit for what they're doing. I think he's a perfect guy to put next to Porzingis. He can play either forward or center. He can mix and match with Porzingis, cover up for some of his defensive deficiencies, defending guys on the perimeter. He's a good switchable guy. Can fit in when Porzingis needs games off. I think it's just a really nice fit for them. They need another big man. With the roster they have some flexibility positionally to kind of move some things around. So I think they may be in the point guard market if they can get a guy who's a shooter. Otherwise, I think they might go after a big man. I think if they get Horford, if you pair Horford, Porzingis, Doncic, Hardaway, and then some combination of guys in the guard rotation, might be Trey Burke, it may be Jalen Brunson, maybe they add someone in free agency. I think this could be a playoff team next year.
I like the fit on the Mavs, but Al Horford just strikes me as an Eastern Conference guy. So this is my surprise free agent pick.
Yeah.
I'm going with the Indiana Pacers. We spoke in our draft recap about the plethora of big men that they now have, but I think a Horford signing allows them to have that second star to pair next to Oladipo, and now they could trade one of Sabonis or Miles Turner and fill out the roster with any other glaring holes. So I think he stays in the East. He might get a meeting with the Nets because of his ties to Kenny Atkinson, but I ultimately think he ends up in Indiana with the Pacers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting pick. I'd be interested to see if they do that, what they do with this glut of big men that they have. And speaking of a glut of big men, The Magic have free agent Nikola Vucevic, who is in a bit of an interesting position here. The Magic are caught now. I think coming into the